Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Upgrades. I'm Jeremy Knoll,
And I'm John Suarez.
and in this episode, we're going to talk about Reap the Tides deck from Commander Legends, headed up by Aesi, Tyrant of Gyre Strait as the commander. Aesi is a new Simic commander that costs 6 mana. It's a 5/5. You can play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So it's very similar to something like a Tatiova, but a little bit different in that it actually has the built-in, you can play another one, and it's a 5/5. Very solid card.
I'm waiting for Wizards to just write "I am Simic" as like a keyword, and you just know that means play an additional land, draw a card. Seems like that's just the generic Simic thing to do. It's very good though. So
It really is. So, as we do in this show, we are going to talk to you about some of the cards that we would take out of the pre-con and a few that we would add in. Obviously, there are these, like we said, for the Zendikar Rising commander decks. These are actually very good just right out of the box. There's been a lot of value put into them. They've been balanced really well, and if you just wanted to play it right out of the box, it's a very solid plan. But to start off with cards that we would suggest taking out, one that I think both of us agreed on pretty quickly was Ior Ruin Expedition. This is a 2 mana enchantment. Landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a quest counter on it, remove 3 quest counters from it, and then sacrifice it to draw 2 cards.
I realize how much worse that card is even listening to you read it. There are just so many better draw spells that you can be doing. Like, I get it, it's on theme with landfall and all that, but there's just so many better things you can do.
Yeah, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, it is an early play in a deck that's full of really expensive cards, so that is like definitely one of the reasons why you might want to keep it in. But yeah, it's gonna pay off much later after you've gotten a few lands and you're already probably drawing extra cards. So
yeah. One of the next cards we were going to cut is going to be Sharkto Crab. Like you said, this deck is full of big creatures. Sharkto Crab doesn't really fit that, giant creature mold. It does have the tapping of a creature, the Frost Titan ability. That kind of thing is like a sub-theme in here. There's several creatures that do that. But Sharkto Crab's pretty low power. There's just better things we can be putting in there in that slot. If we want, bigger dumb idiots, we're gonna get some of those, and we'll probably remove some of the other ones out.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of a big dumb idiot, one that I played and it was near and dear to my heart for a very, very long time in my Maelstrom Wanderer deck. That's Simic Sky Swallower. It's a 7 mana 6/6 flying trample shroud. Just a big dumb idiot with a bunch of keywords on it.
Yeah. I mean, that card was sweet when it was out in Standard.
Yeah.
There were some Tron decks that were actually trying to just casting that card, but nowadays creatures have gotten significantly better, and you can do a lot better than something like that for sure. One of the other cards we're going to cut is actually a brand new card, and that's Stump Squall Hydra. This is an X green Hydra creature. It's a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you distribute +1/+1 counters among it and any number of commanders. So whatever you pay into X, you get to put that many counters on it, and you get to put them on the on another commander. But that seems like a really sweet card if you are like a Xenagos God of Revels deck where it can give the +X/+O and trample, or the Zaxara where you're going to get a Hydra out of it. I think that card makes a lot of sense there. It doesn't make a ton of sense here.
Yeah, for sure. As soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, that's a very good possibility for my Zaxara deck, but not sure if I want to play it in this deck right out of the bat. So our next one is another big dumb idiot, which is Tromokratus, which is a Kraken, 7 mana, 8/8, so it's real big. It has hexproof unless it's attacking or blocking, and it can't be blocked unless all creatures defending player controls block it. So it can really just basically take out whichever creatures you want from your opponent's side, but it is just another 7 mana big dumb creature.
It's also just vulnerable at the times you need it most, like when it's attacking or blocking.
For sure. Yeah, that is a big negative on it. So
one of the other giant creatures that we decided to take out, which is still a pretty good card, but again, there's better options, and that's Sphinx of Uthun. This is the Factor Fiction Sphinx. So for 7 mana, 5/6 flying creature, when it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and the opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. You put 1 to your hand and 1 to the graveyard. Factor Fiction is already in this deck and is obviously very, very good. Sphinx of Uthun is not a bad card by any means, but I think we can just, we can upgrade it to a better one. So.
Yeah. And the last one that we would suggest taking out of the main main cards is going to be Whelming Wave, and this is one that I believe that there's a pretty significant replacement for it. It's a 4-mana sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. Since we're already getting rid of several of those with our suggestions, it kind of loses a lot of its potency.
Yeah.
And
it's also a sorcery. Like I like to be able to kind of do that kind of thing when I want to, and not just on my turn.
Yeah.
So.
And that was only a few of the cards that we went through, but there's one more section that we probably want to go through.
Yeah. So this deck has 44 lands. Now that is not completely unreasonable. There's a lot of ramp, a lot of drawing cards when you play a land. But 44 is a lot. When we talked about this, I actually asked you how many lands did you have in your Tatyova deck, and you said what, 37?
Yeah, currently 37, but it's definitely one where I've been thinking about adding at least 2 more. But that's
sure. So
that's kind of the top end.
40. Yeah, I think 40 lands is probably more than fine for this deck. 41. I would just suggest cutting a couple of basics. Whichever ones you decide you want to, based on what you're going to put into the deck. I chose 2 forests and an island because I think we're going to be adding, some blue spells that we probably want to just have one more island than not. But you have so many lands in the deck, it really doesn't matter too much which one you take
15 islands and 15 forests, just on its own is quite
yeah, 30 basic lands. That's
I mean, I play a lot of basic lands in my decks because I like to go fetch them out with stuff, but that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, moving over to the cards that we think that could improve the deck, and you should probably think about putting in. One that I talked about, Whelming Wave being taken out. The slightly upgraded version, I think, would be Evacuation. This is one that I've always liked, and even after Cyclonic Rift came out, I still run it in several of my decks, just because I enjoy the fact that it does balance everyone, and you don't become a target like what you do with Cyclonic Rift, and it's just creatures. But it is a 5-mana, and it's an instant, which is another really big thing.
Yeah, it's a very powerful card. Been around for a while. Definitely a favorite of mine. Let's jump into one of the giant creatures that we're going to be probably the biggest creature in your deck, actually, that we would suggest putting in there, and that's Multani Yavimaya Avatar. 6-mana, reach, trample, legendary creature. Its power and toughness. Or it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land in your graveyard. So no matter where your lands are, as long as they're not in your hand or in exile, that's how big Multani is. And then for 2 mana, 1 in the green, you can return 2 lands you control to your hand and return Multani from your graveyard to your hand. So this card will just always come back and always pose a massive threat because this deck already plays 44. We're going down to 41 or 40, but that's still a ton of lands, and this creature will be massive every time it hits the battlefield.
Yeah, it's scary, and especially with that reach and trample added into it. It gets real out of hand real fast. The next one is one that I really like, which is the Mending of Dominaria. It's a 5-mana saga that has the first 2 are mill 2 cards, then you return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then the last one is return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Just another way for you to be able to power out a bunch of the extra lands that you're going to be putting into your graveyard from that ability. And it could help you out a little bit later, especially if you're getting a little bit low and you want to really just get the whole graveyard back in there and start refilling your deck with useful spells. So,
yep. We talked about replacing Irarune Expedition, and the card we chose for that is Trade Routes. This card doesn't see enough play, in my opinion. Very, very good card. 2-mana enchantment. You pay 1, return a land you control to your hand. Excellent for some of the cards we're going to talk about in just a moment, as well as just resetting any of your value lands. And you could pay 1, discard a land from your hand, and draw a card.
Yeah.
With all of these lands in this deck, that's pretty good. With the Mending of Dominaria, you're going to get them back, like you just mentioned. With Multani's power and toughness still grows. Very, very good card in this deck.
Yeah, this is an excellent one. So we went over a few different cards that would have ways to return lands to your hand, and another enchantment is Mana Breach, and this is a 2 and a blue enchantment. Whenever a player plays a spell, that player returns a land he or she controls to its owner's hand. So this one is kind of annoying for your opponents too. It really hinders their plans, because you're going to be able to power out more lands with just the amount of ramp that's in the deck. With your commander itself, you're just going to be drawing, and you want to be playing those extra lands with all the other stuff that's going on in the deck. So it is actually kind of a benefit to you and slows down everyone else.
Yeah. Another, not so much as a draw spell, but it's Abundance. 2 colorless and a green enchantment, originally from Urza's Saga, and it's been reprinted a couple of times now, but it says, if you would draw a card, you may instead choose land or non-land, and then you reveal the top cards of your library until you reveal a card of your choice, and you put the rest of them on the bottom of your library in any order. So for the beginning parts of the game, if you just need to get more lands and you have this early, you can always make sure you draw a land. And then late game, when you have 27 in play, you will never draw a land again, ever. You will just, every time you draw a card, you just decide to choose non-land instead. So you'll never run out of spells.
Yeah, Abundance is a great card. So another way to be able to kind of get some value out of your lands, we've been talking about things like having the Mending of Dominaria and Multani being able to get bigger with it and stuff like that, is there should be ways for you to be able to also sacrifice your lands. And I have chosen Zurin Orb, which is a really solid card, a 0 mana artifact, pay 0, sacrifice a land to gain 2 life. The life gain is usually incidental to stuff like this, where you're just trying to sack lands to, get a little bit of value out of those lands later, but it can really add up in the long run.
Yeah. So we have another draw spell that we both chose, and I'm a huge fan of. I play a significant amount of Vintage, and this is one of the most broken cards you can play there, and that is Gush. Gush is a simple card. It is Dark Ritual plus draw 2 cards. Can't beat that. So you return 2 islands to your hand instead of paying its mana cost, and you draw 2 cards at instant speed. So if you need to draw cards on someone else's turn, you can play it defensively, but on your turn, this allows you to tap 2 lands, return them to your hand to draw 2 cards, play the land, tap it again, get more mana out of it, draw more cards. For the next cards we're going to be talking about, it allows you to reset some of your utility lands. That's going to be pretty great for cards like Mystic Sanctuary if you're playing that. Or any of those kinds of islands. This card can do some damage.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of good lands that you can get some value out of as well. And so the other things that we're going to talk about are the newer cards from Zendikar Rising that are the dual modal fates cards, and we've picked out a couple of them. The first one is Balaged Recovery, which just comes into play as a green mana source on the land side. But if you can pick that back up a little bit later, you can also play it as a 3 mana regrowth effect. It's 2 and a green sorcery. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So just any of these dual modal face cards are going to be really, really good with anything that can allow you to return those lands to your hand or sacrifice them and then get them out of your graveyard and stuff like that.
Yeah, these lands or these cards and like trade routes, that's going to be obnoxious just to be able to pick up out of nowhere. Pick up your land, get a spell out of it, get your best spell back out of the graveyard with Balaged Recovery.
Yeah.
And the other card that we were suggesting to put in here, which is Glasspool Mimic. Early game, if you need the land, it's a land, comes into play tapped, and if late game, it's a 3 mana clone. It's 2 and a blue. You can have it come into play. End of the battlefield is a copy of a creature you control, except it retains its shapeshifter rogue creature type in addition to others. So, again, these modal double face cards are just very, very powerful. The mythic ones obviously are very powerful and would be good in this deck as well. But even the common ones are still incredibly powerful.
Yeah, just being able to copy something like a Murkfiend Liege in this deck would just be ridiculously good. Not to mention, even the high end stuff like a Terastodon or Rampaging Baloths or something like that. Just being able to copy something like that and get that extra value, like double value out of it, would be so good. So
yeah, imagine copying a Muldrifter.
Yeah, just copying a Muldrifter is just being able to.
That's the best thing you can do.
So obviously those are the cards that we would suggest putting in, and there are plenty more to put into this deck. So make sure to let us know what cards you would add into the deck into the comments below. Remember to also like, share, and subscribe. For John Suarez, I am Jeremy Knoll. Thanks for watching.